Hi everyone, I thought I would show you an idea for if you'd like to make miniatures but you haven't got the storage space. So this is a miniature potion room that I made ages ago. Obviously I've took it apart, and what I'm currently doing is I've took the back wall off the model and I'm cutting it down to size so it fits into the box frame that I have. And the way I measured it was I just used the back of the box frame that fits inside, held that against the back wall of the miniature, and then just saw which bits I've got to chop off. And then the next job is to glue back on some of the details for that background. So this little frame got knocked off while I was chopping off bits of the background, and I wanted to remove these little flowers because I want it to have a bit of a darker aesthetic without the pretty pink flowers, like so. And then it's just a case of testing to see if it fits in the frame, which it didn't quite. It just does need a bit more chopping down, but I'll do that a bit later on. Then the main part to do was in the frame, there was like an inner frame that held the glass in place, and I wanted to use that in the frame to hold the background in position. But I did remove the glass because the miniature stuck out further than the glass, and also it means I can see the miniature quite well. It's just a case you'd have to sort of blow the dust off every once in a while, but other than that it's fine without glass on. You could put the glass on if you wanted to, but it would have meant for me trimming everything down a lot smaller, and I didn't want to do that, so I just left it as it was. And the first thing to do was to glue the inner frame to the background piece. And the reason obviously I've took all the shelving and stuff off at the moment is because obviously I'm fiddling about with the background and trimming anything that needs trimming. So I cut it down, and as you can see it fits fairly well into this little frame. There is a bit of overlap at the sides, but it's just a case of trimming that down later. And I'm using hot glue to stick all this together. I find hot glue holds it really well, and it's a lot less messy for me than super glue. Super glue just sticks me to everything instead of my models. And I'm just working out what I need to trim off to make the little bookcase fit a bit better. I worked out that I've got a little piece that was sticking out at the back that I just needed to trim off because it stuck out a bit more than the rest of it, and I wanted the miniature to be fairly level. So I'm just trimming at the back of the bookcase, and this bookcase is just made out of coffee stirrers that were trimmed and glued together and then painted black. I'll put a link in the description to the video where I actually made this miniature as well, so you can see how I made it. So I've just made sure it's as flush to the inner frame piece as I can possibly get it. It doesn't have to be perfect because the glass is not in the frame anyway, but it's just to make sure that there's no problems when I come to reinsert the inner frame into the outer frame of the box frame. So I'm just putting plenty of glue on and then sticking that back into place where it was before on the background piece. And then the bits I had to move was I'd got a shelf and a desk. I've adapted those and turned them into shelves, and you'll see me add those on in a little bit. I also stuck back into place the ball of twine and the logs that I'd got underneath the bookcase on the original model. Like so, just to fill up that space, and it looked a bit better with that full. and it's just all held together with little blobs of hot glue. Obviously, if you were making this from scratch, you would first of all coat and paint the background and leave that to dry, and then just build the furniture up on from there. The little mini jars I use I got off Amazon in various shapes and sizes, and they were fairly cheap as well. A couple of them, one I filled with sand, a couple I filled with different coloured glitters. I've filled some with hot glue, poppy seeds, herbs, anything really I could find that might look interesting in the jar. The little labels I found online and then just printed those off and miniaturized them and then printed them off so they would fit. It was like a free printable. So here I've trimmed down the long shelf that I used to have in the other miniature, and as you can see the desk doesn't fit, but I change it to a shelf in a bit. This is me just working out how high I want to put that shelf, and then put plenty of glue on and glue the shelf back to the background. So I have had to take the miniature apart slightly because obviously originally it was made with 2 walls and I'm reducing it down to 1 wall. Then I added some more glue to the inner frame because it was lifting up on the one side, so I just needed a bit more glue in place and just held it down until the glue cooled, and I found that made it stick really well. I didn't have any problems after that. What I could have done really is removed some of the background materials because it's like plaster and different things that I used, but never mind. Then it was a case of taking the desk apart. So first of all what I needed to do was remove the objects on top, and again the reason I like hot glue is because it'll hold everything on until you want to snap it off, but it will snap off fairly easy. It just leaves a little blob of hot glue stuck to the bottom of the object that you've removed. Then it was a case of cutting down the desk. As you can see the rows of coffee stirrers that it's made out of, which is fairly easy to cut through with a craft knife. And then they just bend and snap off, which is why I like using them, because they're very easy to change. And then I just got to work out how much of the length I needed to chop off. I was originally going to leave the legs on and have it as like a little desk against the wall, but it didn't really look right, so I removed the legs. You'll see in a bit. And I just glued the edge back on because I broke that off. I kind of like the sort of broken down, sort of worn out effect anyway, so I wasn't too worried about anything looking perfect. I want this to look like a sort of very derelict, very run down potion room. Like the witch who lives in here is probably hundreds of years old and hasn't worried about decorating for years. Just leaves it as it is and just concentrates on making her potions. I was originally, as you can see, going to stick the leg back on after I trimmed the edge, but I didn't bother. I decided it looked fine as a shelf and just did it as a shelf. And I'm just working out anything I need to cut. I saw that it was sticking out a little bit too far at the front, so I just trimmed a little bit more off the back. Obviously, if you wanted to cut it off a bit neater, you could use a ruler, but I'm quite lazy when it comes to stuff like this. I don't worry about measuring and stuff. I just trim stuff until it fits. Like so, and then stuck that in place. It was just a case of gluing it and holding it in position and holding it as straight as I could as the glue set. And I glued it at the back and at the side so that I could glue it to the side of the main bookcase. So really it's kind of like a floating shelf that's attached to the edge of the bookcase. And then I just made sure it was as straight as I could get it, and then put some extra glue in just to make sure it stayed in position and gave it a bit more strength. But when I stick the objects on afterwards, like the books and the jar, I do put a bit of glue on the back of those as well, and that just makes everything a bit more rigid and holds into place a bit better. And then it was a case of just gluing back on the little stack of books, miniature books I'd made, the little, I've got like a miniature sauce, miniature plate and a miniature like gravy boat thing from a doll's house from years ago that my daughter used to play with, and stuck those on as well. These little wine bottles that I got off Amazon. I'm not sponsored by Amazon or anything at all, it's just you can get loads of this stuff online. I didn't want to try and make the little bottles, so I just bought them. Here's one of those little jars where I filled this one with hot glue, and it's supposed to be snail slime, so that's why I used the hot glue. That's what it says on the label, it says snail slime. I had a look at this other little piece that was on there and I couldn't figure out what that used to be, so I just discarded that one and just placed on the little ceramic gravy boat. I like having the little dots here and there of florally things in between all the sort of dark spell looking stuff. I wanted to add a little touch of, this is like a little old lady's potion room, so some little knickknacks that a little old lady might have, I've added to the piece. This is one of the potion jars where I've just filled it up with black and silver glitter. And as you can see, I put glue on the back and glue on the bottom, and that will hold it nice and securely into place. And then using the hot glue gun, I just dab the very end of the hot glue gun against the surface and move it quickly, and it creates little streaks, little cobwebby effects for the piece. And then glued back on some of the little miniature foliage pieces that I'd used on the other part of the background. I want it to look like you know, the room's damp, it's growing, like things are growing on the walls and on the furniture. You know, this is not the house of someone who's worried about it being like, you know, pristine and clean. I like the idea of it sort of, it's almost like the room's being taken back by nature at the same time. I added some more cobwebs. And then I glued everything into the outer frame and then glued the back of the original frame onto the back of the board of the miniature, and that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.